So we're going to be in Judges 17 and 18 this morning. It's the beginning of the Epilogue of Judges. We're only going to cover the first two chapters. Thankfully, the last three are kind of the more gruesome, so I'm going to leave those for Zach. So 17 and 18, really the whole epilogue is kind of an anecdotal evidence of the moral degradation of Israel. There's not exactly a consensus on when it happened. The only dating item is kind of at the end of 18. One of the characters is identified as Jonathan, the son of Gershom, son of Moses. Some versions say Manasseh. There's some debate on who this guy is. But if he truly is a grandson of Moses, this most likely happened kind of 50 years after Joshua came in and all the people conquered the land. And so that's, I guess, an idea of when it happened. It doesn't truly matter because we're looking at the principles of what's happening here. All right, so the Philistines are not directly mentioned in the epilogue, but their influence and the effect of them invading southern Israel is evident here. And we've already been introduced to them in Judges 13 through 16 with the story of Samson. We see at the end of chapter 15 and verse 11, when the men of Judah come to capture Samson, they say, "Do you not know that the Philistines are rulers over us?" So in that southern area of Israel, kind of Simeon, Benjamin, Judah, Dan, all these tribes in the south, they're being affected by the Philistines at this time. They've come in and invaded the land. So I was joking about not having a map. Unfortunately, this would really help. But imagine the Mediterranean is this big oval, right? And I'm going to try and flip this for you guys. So Israel is going to be on the eastern side. It's just a rectangle over here. Crete is an island out in the middle of the Aegean Mediterranean Sea. So the Philistines most likely came from Crete. They traveled over through on boats and settled kind of in Sidon. We're going to be reading from Judges 17. So they traveled over to north of Israel in Sidon and settled there for a little while, decided they didn't want to be there. So they go down to Egypt and try and conquer that land. They get defeated in Egypt, and so they come up the coast and start wreaking havoc in southern Israel. So that's kind of where it's believed they come from. And we see how they affect the Israelites in this. We've already seen it in Samson, but a lot of the people in southern Israel start to get displaced because of that. And so we'll see that mostly more in 18 than 17, but that's kind of the backdrop here of what's going on in Israel at that time. All right, so we'll start in 17, verse 1. We'll read through verse 6 at first, and then we'll kind of discuss what's going on here. So there was a man of the hill country of Ephraim, whose name was Micah, and he said to his mother, "The 1,100 pieces of silver that were taken from you, about which you uttered a curse, and also spoke in my ears, behold, the silver is with me. I took it." And his mother said, "Blessed be my son by the Lord." And he restored the 1,100 pieces of silver to his mother. And his mother said, "I dedicate the silver to the Lord from my hand for my son, to make a carved image and a metal image. Now, therefore, I will restore it to you." So when he restored the money to his mother took 200 pieces of silver and gave it to the silversmith, who made it into a carved image and a metal image, and it was in the house of Micah. And the man Micah had a shrine, and he made an ephod and household gods, and ordained one of his sons to become his priest. In those days there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. All right, so important to note here, Micah is not the prophet Micah that we see later. This is a different guy, has plenty of problems. The name Micah, does anyone know what that means? No? Okay. It means who is like Yahweh. So it's kind of this statement about the holiness of God, setting him apart from everyone, every other god, every other person. It's setting him apart as holy. It's a statement. So we see that this guy doesn't really live up to his name. He kind of disregards God, disregards his law, the priesthood, everything. This whole story is taking place in the hill country of Ephraim, which is in central Israel. And The city Shiloh is 10 miles north of there. And that's a significant city to the Israelites at this time because that's where the tabernacle is. It's where the priesthood is, the Ark of the Covenant, therefore the presence of God is in Shiloh, within 10 miles of where this guy is setting up this false shrine, his own tabernacle, his own priesthood. It's just a disregard of God and the priesthood that he's made, his law, everything. Just wholesale getting rid of God from this whole thing. They claim it's for Yahweh, but it's not. It's for their own convenience and their own power. 1,100 pieces of silver is a lot of money at that time. We see in the next section that this priest comes and he is given 10 pieces of silver a year. So that's his yearly salary. So 1,100 pieces, doing the math, that's 110 years' salary. That's a lot of money. So he's taken a lot of money from his mom. And then Ananias and Sapphira, that we kind of have a similar situation here to what happened with Ananias and Sapphira in Acts chapter 5, where they sell their land and then they claim that they've given everything to the Lord, but they've actually given a small portion of it. Nothing's wrong with giving not a full amount to the Lord, but obviously she's kind of using her money to have this false piety towards God and kind of grandstand and be like, okay, I'm giving all of my money to the Lord, and then she only gives part of it. So she's kind of manipulating the situation to make herself seem more spiritual than she is. Okay, that's a lot of the stuff that I saw in this first section. Did anybody else see anything that they thought was interesting or wanted to talk about? Those days there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. Yeah, that's a powerful statement. There's two isms, I guess, that philosophers have come up with or whatever that kind of speak to this. There's syncretism and there's existentialism. Syncretism is a conflation or a blending of different belief systems just to make what you want of your own thing. So there's zero integrity in the belief system that they're following. So that's really what the Israelites have done here. They've taken all of the gods and the belief systems of the Canaanites who lived in that land, even the Philistines, and blended it with their own belief system of Jehovah, of God. And so they don't really know how to truly worship God in this situation. They've just left that way, and it hasn't been passed along. It's gone at this point. And then existentialism, there's no true right or wrong. There's no absolute morality, and so it's kind of this idea that we see today where it's living your own truth, just kind of doing what you think is right. There's no guiding absolute authority on what's right and wrong, so you can just do what you want. So those two things are kind of embodied in that statement. And it's kind of the tagline that's used throughout the book of Judges to show the decay of the morality of Israel.
They had no shame in creating their own gods and knowing full well that they kept angering the angered God because of it. And Micah's mother took all that silver and created an image, golden image, graven image.
And we see a lot of the Ten Commandments being broken just right out the gate in these first 6 verses. I mean, we have, you shall have no other gods before me. They're already doing that with graven images and metal images. You shouldn't have graven images. Again, same thing. And then honoring your father and mother, he's stealing from his mother, so that's not exactly honoring her. And then, obviously, you shall not steal. He stole them. And then, kind of questionably, taking the Lord's name in vain. She said, "Blessed be my son by the Lord." I wasn't sure about that one, but just a lot of 10 Commandments immediately in the story. They're just violated right out the gate. So, again, complete, flagrant disregard for God and his law. Yeah. Okay, we'll pick up in verse 7 and move on. Now there was a young man of Bethlehem in Judah, of the family of Judah, who was a Levite, and he sojourned there. And the man departed from the town of Bethlehem in Judah to sojourn where he could find a place. And as he journeyed, he came to the hill country of Ephraim, to the house of Micah. And Micah said to him, "Where do you come from?" And he said to him, "I am a Levite of Bethlehem in Judah, and I'm going to sojourn where I may find a place." And Micah said to him, "Stay with me, and be to me a father and a priest, and I will give you 10 pieces of silver a year, and a suit of clothes, and your living." And the Levite went in, and the Levite was consented, and the Levite was content to dwell with the man, and the young man became to him like one of his sons. And Micah ordained the Levite, and the young man became his priest, and was in the house of Micah. Then Micah said, "Now I know that the Lord will prosper me, because I have a Levite as a priest." So, did anyone see anything that caught their eye? Something interesting in this passage?
This says right here, 1760, $17.60
Per year as a salary? Okay. Yeah. So within the tribe of Levi, the descendants of Aaron are the only ones that could be priests. So this doesn't say that this Levite was of the line of Aaron. Most likely he wasn't. He's from Judah. So yes, Micah's son absolutely can't be a priest. This Levite who comes in, I mean, I don't think he can be a priest because he doesn't say he's from the line of Aaron. So yeah, this Levite comes in and he sees this shrine with these idols, and he sees this false priest serving in this scenario. I mean, Deuteronomy 13, it's a whole chapter, so we won't read through the whole thing, but it describes what the Israelites are supposed to do when there's idolatry and they come across it, especially if their brother is the one who's saying, "Hey, let's go worship this idol instead of Yahweh God." And they're supposed to kill that person, and they're supposed to destroy the idol. That's what it says. So this Levite, who should have known the law, because the Levites who weren't in the line of Aaron were supposed to facilitate the priests with serving in the temple occasionally. And they were supposed to be embedded within all the tribes and regions of Israel, and they were supposed to teach, and they were supposed to kind of be administrators of God's law throughout that area. They're supposed to be the most holy people in this nation at the time, and this guy's not that. So he comes in, and he should rebuke him at the very least for having this shrine, and he should destroy these idols. Instead, he joins and becomes their more or less chief priest. So clearly he's, again, disregarded God and God's law. All right, so it says that he is sojourning to find a place. So he's coming from Bethlehem in Judah, which is, if we'll say it's here, and then the hill country of Ephraim is kind of north of that, and then Shiloh is more north of that. So me wanting to give this guy the benefit of the doubt is thinking, okay, maybe he's leaving Bethlehem to go up to Shiloh to serve at the temple. Maybe, but that's the best case. That's just my own conjecture. But obviously he finds this other place on the way and just decides to become a priest there. So he's not truly pursuing God. He's not truly pursuing the law. So that was interesting, I guess, to me.
None of them are really pursuing God at this point. They're pursuing how to make themselves stronger and more powerful. And you can see it with Micah. He's built this temple, and then a Levite man just happens to pass through. He's like, oh, look how great I am doing because God has blessed me with a Levite priest. So they're not seeking God. They're just seeking what makes them happy and what makes them feel more powerful and greater. And you can just see how, Sherry pointed out verse 6, and it just, it shows it's all about me, I, not God in this scenario.
Exactly. And they're seeking man's approval over God's approval. He thinks that because this Levite has joined him in his cause, that he's approved, I guess, even of the Lord. So just because someone else thinks you're doing right or says you're doing right doesn't mean that you are. There's only one true source. There's one true source of God's will and what God has approved, and that's his word. It's not anyone else's say-so. Yeah, agreed. Okay, that's all I had for this section. Anybody else have anything they wanted to bring up, talk about? Yeah.
You mentioned earlier when you started at the top of the lesson about, the dates don't necessarily matter. It's the substance of the text that speaks to us. And this is a good illustration of what happens today, where just because you say that you are doing something in the name of the Lord, as in the early verses here, that she dedicated that silver to the Lord. And just because I'm going to dedicate what I'm doing to the Lord, and then go about your way of doing what you want, the way you want to serve the Lord, or the way that you want to glorify Him or worship Him. And we know through learning Scripture how important it is to worship the Lord in His way and His way only, adding nothing to it, taking nothing away from it, and like Brian talked about, there was no consecration here. The guy says he's a Levite, but he's not, consecrated, being by the Lord or anything like that. So it's just a cobbled religion they're putting together here, a cobbled up religion of people wandering through, and like the Old West, where you come through, I'm going to make you sheriff, I'm going to make someone else a judge, and I'm going to run the town, and we're going to call it a city.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah.
So that's, my point is, I read this, what the Gallie Church put together about what a Christian is, right here, I got it out for you. It's important to know when someone asks you, oh, what church do you go to? Well, it's not a cobbled up mess that we can't hardly explain, because we have our own doctrines and stuff. And by the way, I speak from experience because Julie and I started out worshiping at Baptist church, Methodist denominations, Presbyterians, and even in leadership. And then when you study this word, you realize they're not doing it in the name of the Lord. Well, they do it in the name of the Lord, but they're not following the letter of what we understand is the law.
Yeah. So the Jews were supposed to pass along the knowledge of God and His law through their families, and they were supposed to teach their children. So clearly that hasn't been happening in this scenario at all. It is absolutely important to follow the law and what God has ordained as how to pleasingly worship Him and to serve Him through his word. There's one authentic source for God's will, and that's his word. So, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, agreed. Jim, did you have something?
Yes, the duties of priests, one of their duties was to teach the law. They were to teach the people. Of course, this man being a Levite wasn't a priest. If he had been a priest, it would have been, it would have said so. And as you pointed out earlier, all priests were Levites, but not all Levites were priests. So he being a Levite and did not have an inheritance, really, because Levi didn't inherit, but they lived off of the tithes and the people of the land, and so he was going to find a place. So he was just looking at where he could be useful and to support himself. And of course, when he found Malcolm and the deal that he offered him, he settled for that. But he's just as wrong as Michael was.
Yeah, he found power and wealth is what he found. Yeah, he didn't find God. Yeah. All right, we're going to go ahead and move on to chapter 18. All right, while we read through this, keep in mind two things. One, this is where the Philistines are displacing the southern region, so people are shifting around looking for different areas. And then also the hill country of Ephraim, where this is taking place, 10 miles, more or less, from Shiloh, which is where the tabernacle, the true priesthood, the Ark of the Covenant, God's presence truly is. So we're very close to there, but we're not there. So keep that in mind. We'll read through verse 6. In those days there was no king in Israel, and in those days the tribe of the people of Dan was seeking for itself an inheritance to dwell in. For until then no inheritance among the tribes of Israel had fallen to them. So the people of Dan sent 5 able men from the whole number of their tribe, from Zorah and from Eshtaol, to spy out the land and to explore it. And they said to them, "Go and explore the land." And they came to the hill country of Ephraim, to the house of Micah, and lodged there. When they were by the house of Micah, they recognized the voice of the young Levite, and they turned aside and said to him, "Who brought you here? What are you doing in this place? What is your business here?" And he said to them, "This is how Micah dealt with me. He has hired me, and I have become his priest." And they said to him, "Inquire of God, please, that we may know whether the journey on which we are setting out will succeed." And the priest said to them, "Go in peace. The journey on which you go is under the eye of the Lord." All right, so the Dan people from the tribe of Dan, did have an allotment of land. It was in that southwest region of Israel. It goes all the way to the coast of the Mediterranean Sea. I've heard it's a beautiful area, great coastline. God gave them beachfront property, basically, and they're deserting that land because the Philistines are taking over. Like I said before, we read before in chapter 15, verse 11, "Do you not know that the Philistines are rulers over us?" That was from the tribe of Judah, the people that said that. So the people of Dan are being displaced. They're just forsaking the land because it's inhabited by the Philistines. They don't want it, so they're going to take somewhere else. Well, they're spying out the land. Sorry, we haven't got to the spot where they're taking over the land yet. But so they're going to spy out the other areas around where they can attack and take over. And so they come and they find this priest, they find this shrine to God, and they, again, should have destroyed the idol and killed their brothers who are telling them to go worship a false god. Instead, what do? They accept it, and they ask him to inquire of God for them. And so, again, I think this is another Ten Commandment that's being violated here. It's bearing false witness of what God has said to these people. So another Ten Commandment that's being broken in this section. So, so the Levite false priest says, "Go in peace, the journey on which you go is under the eye of the Lord." So all this is taking place, again, 10 miles from Shiloh. They could have gone to the true tabernacle, inquired of the true priests of what's going to be happening there, or what's going to happen on their spy mission. But they decide not to. They stay at this other place. All right, did anybody else see anything interesting in this section? Bring up? Nope. All right. We'll read 7 through 13 next. Then the 5 men departed and came to Laish and saw the people who were there, how they lived in security after the manner of the Sidonians, quiet and unsuspecting, lacking nothing that is in the earth and possessing wealth, and how they were far from the Sidonians and had no dealings with anyone. And when they came to their brothers at Zorah and Eshtaol, their brothers said to them, "What do you report?" They said, "Arise, and let us go up against them, for we have seen the land, and behold, it is very good. And will you do nothing? Do not be slow to enter in and possess the land. As soon as you go in, you will come to an unsuspecting people. The land is spacious, for God has given it into your hands, a place where there is no lack of anything that is in the earth." All right. Oh, sorry, that was 11, wasn't it? So 600 men of the tribe of Dan, armed with weapons of war, set out from Zorah and Eshtaol, and went up and encamped at Kiriath-Jearim in Judah. On this account, that place is called Mahanadan to this day. Behold, it is west of Kiriath-Jearim. And they passed on from there to the hill country of Ephraim and came to the house of Micah. All right, so this is very similar to when the spies go and spy out the land of Israel and then come back and give a report, obviously the bad report. So they do the same kind of thing. They're going to copy exactly what they saw Joshua do when they went to go, or Moses and Joshua when they went to take over the land. So they sent out spies to look at the land before they go to attack it and find a good area to take over. And so they find this place, Laish, that they can attack and take over because they don't really have any allies. They're unprotected. They're weak. So that's kind of taking advantage. But I don't exactly know if this is an Israelite town or not. On a map that I looked at, it looked like it was very, very far north. So Naphtali is one of the furthest north tribes, and it was kind of in their region. So I don't know exactly if it is an Israelite town or not. If anyone knows otherwise, please correct me. But regardless, it says that they're living after the manner of the Sidonians, who were Canaanites. They were not Israelite people, so they're not really. I mean, this town is wealthy and unprotected. Did anyone else see anything caught their eye in this section? All right. And they did consult with the Levite, too. They said, is God going to be on our side for this? And he says, yes. All right, next we'll read 14 through 20. Then the 5 men who had gone to scout out the country of Laish said to their brothers, "Do you know that in these houses there are an ephod, household gods, a carved image, and a metal image? Now therefore consider what you will do." And they turned aside there and came to the house of the young Levite at the home of Micah, and asked him about his welfare. Now the 600 men of the Danites, armed with their weapons of war, stood by the entrance of the gate. And the 5 men who had gone to scout out the land went up and entered and took the carved image, the ephod, the household gods, and the metal image, while the priest stood by the entrance of the gate with 600 men armed with weapons of war. And when these went into Micah's house and took the carved image, the ephod, and the household gods, and the metal image, the priest said to them, "What are you doing?" And they said to him, "Keep quiet, put your hand over your mouth, and come with us, and be a father to us and a priest. Is it better for you to be a priest to the house of one man, or to be a priest to a tribe and a clan in Israel?" And the priest's heart was glad. He took the ephod and the household gods and the carved image and went along with the people. Again, we see a true priest, if he thought that this was, you're shaking your head. Yeah, it's a ridiculous story, I agree.
If you're not somewhat familiar with Scripture, this would be so confusing. Like you would think, oh, it's okay to do that. You know, dedicate it in the name of the Lord. And why is everybody getting, why are we talking like this? Well,
Yeah.
it's just a crazy mess.
Yeah, but also it would kind of make sense, right? Because, I mean, throughout throughout the history of man, like this is how man acts when they're left to their own devices. They kill other people, they take other people's things, they do evil things. So that's what we're seeing here, and what we've seen throughout the book of Judges. That as there's no leadership, there's no one to point people to God. That's people devolve, and there's moral degradation, and the nation just falls apart. Yeah, Jim.
Now, the devil wouldn't have much success if what he wanted didn't appeal to people.
That's right.
True. Yeah. Yeah. It's the results that don't appeal to people, but the way to get there is appealing. Yeah. That's why he's the master deceiver. Yeah. And it's scary too.
Showed the state Israel was in, just a mess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All they did was fight.
True.
What was kind of ironic was, it says, the young man became to Micah like his own son. And then he goes with these other guys.
Yeah.
Like there was no feeling there or anything.
Right. Yeah.
Just dropped him.
No loyalty at all. Yeah. Right.
I couldn't hear what was said on that side of the room entirely, but maybe it was already said. But this Levite, he seems to go the way that's easiest and fills his pocket the most, or makes his life the most easy. He went from the household, he had the temptation of being over a whole tribe, and he latches onto it with highly likely with no authority.
Yeah. He's seeking power and wealth is what he's after. He's not seeking service to God. He's not seeking God's glory. He's seeking his own glory. And so he sees this opportunity to make more money and have power over an entire tribe of Israel. So yeah, obviously that's a no-brainer. If you're not seeking God, yeah, that's what you do. Yeah. Make them their own God and their own priesthood. Yeah, their whole own religion. Yeah.
It's like they clearly did not do what they were supposed to do, whether they knew what they were supposed to be doing or not.
Right. Yeah. Okay, we'll pick back up in verse 21 through 26. So they turned and departed, putting the little ones and the livestock and the goods in front of them. When they had gone a distance from the home of Micah, the men who were in the houses near Micah's house were called out, and they overtook the people of Dan. And they shouted to the people of Dan, who turned around and said to Micah, "What is the matter with you, that you have come with such a great company?" And he said, "You take my gods that I made and the priest, and go away, and what have I left? How then do you ask me, what is the matter with you?" And the people of Dan said to him, "Do not let your voice be heard among us, lest angry fellows fall upon you, and you lose your life and the lives of your household." Then the people of Dan went away, and when Micah saw that they were too strong for him, he turned and went back to his home. So that's a very sad statement that he makes in verse 24. You take my gods that I made and the priest and go away, and what have I left? I mean, what have I left is a sad thing. I mean, he's created these idols, he's worshiping these man-made things, and then somebody else comes in and takes them. I mean, how weak of a God is it that someone else can come in and just take it? I mean, obviously they hold no power. They're just pieces of metal or of wood. So I mean, it's a sad statement that his entire life is wrapped up in these two objects and this one Levite man, which were taken, and now he has nothing. And I mean, that speaks volumes for us, because as Christians, we know Romans 8:28, no one can separate us from God. Because that's immediately what comes to my mind when I hear that, is that, I mean, no one can come in and take God away from us. It's Romans 8:38. I'll start in 37. No, in all these we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. For I am sure that neither death nor life, nor angels, nor rulers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor powers, nor height, nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus our Lord. I mean, that's just beautiful, that we have such a hope in God that even if someone comes in and kills us, or comes in, destroys this building, comes in and, not exactly, it's graven. It's not really a graven image. But if somebody comes in and like destroys the pulpit or this table or anything like that, it doesn't matter. I mean, what matters is our covenant with God, and that he sent his son to die on the cross, and that we've entered into that covenant with him in the way that he has ordained through his word. That's what matters. Nothing on this earth can happen to us. Nothing on this earth can be taken from us that removes that hope or that love from us. So I got through that without crying. That was the one spot where I could have cried, so that was okay. We got it. Angie?
It's easy to look at this and sort of see the ridiculousness of building these idols and then calling them gods. But, we do the same thing, that man with the all-powerful job who uses it. And all of a sudden, his world has crumbled and he has no hope. And, having his faith in, his family and his wife, and something happens, and I think either a kill or she leaves him or whatever the case, and then all of a sudden, I have nothing, everything's been taken from me. And we always have God. And so these are like, we look at them as these idols as something that we don't do, but we do it. We set our own idols up. So being able to acknowledge that what truly is the important thing. So if we do lose everything, and there are people in this country, in this world who are losing everything right now, in one way or another, but if they have God, they have everything. And so trying to keep that kind of a focus when you are actually in the midst of losing the things that you might have set up in the wrong kind of way, it's a hard thing to do.
And that's the peace that surpasses understanding that we have. Yeah, exactly. And yeah, this guy's statement, "What have I left?" That can kind of be a litmus test, I think, for if we have an idol in our lives. If we can look at something and it would truly destroy our lives and we would be lost without it. I don't want to say that that absolutely is a judge. I wouldn't say that that's absolutely an idol, but I think it's something to be wary of. I think we need to be careful with an idol is anything we place above God, right? So, if you're placing something above God and you can't live without it, that's something to reconsider, I would say. So, yeah, we don't have graven images or carved images, but we have our own idols in our own ways. Yeah, Dave.
That's something that we read about how God is jealous and how God, He wants us 100%. He wants our whole heart as well. So when we start talking about, sharing our heart with something else or something else being, taking time away from God or being something that we want alongside of God. We love God and God's number one, but we've got this other thing that's really critically important too. We don't want to give that up. It's like, well, but either we love God or we don't, right? Either God is what's important or that other thing that we have is what's important. It's like, are we willing to give that thing up or are we going to give God up? We have to make that decision. We can't serve two masters, right? One of them is going to control us. So which one is it going to be? Is it going to be God or is it going to be this other thing?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we got to get moving here. Running out of time. All right, we'll pick up in 27. But the people of Dan took what Micah had made and the priest who belonged to him, and they came to Laish, to a people quiet and unsuspecting, and struck them with the edge of the sword and burned the city with fire. And there was no deliverer, because it was far from Sidon, and they had no dealings with anyone. It was in the valley that belongs to Beth Rahab. Then they built the city and lived in it, and they named the city Dan, after the name of Dan, their ancestor, who was born to Israel. But the name of the city was Laish at the first, and the people of Dan set up the carved image for themselves. And Jonathan, the son of Gershom, son of Moses, and his sons were priests to the tribe of the Danites until the day of the captivity of the land. So they set up Micah's carved image that he made as long as the house of God was at Shiloh. All right, so again, timing, it's murky, but let's assume that this is truly the grandson of Moses, Jonathan, the son of Gershom, son of Moses. Most likely, this happened around 1350 BC. The Assyrian captivity, when they came in and captured the northern section of Israel and took them off to never return, happened in 722 BC. So this idol was set up in this area and they worshipped it for 628 years. No one came in and destroyed it or told them it was wrong, rebuked them, nothing. So that's outrageous. And then one interesting thing to note here is that this is kind of the vanguard, I guess, of idolatry within Israel, the tribe of Dan and this idol. Later on, when in the story with the kings and the division of Israel, after Solomon, the kingdom of Israel is divided, north and south Judah, north Israel. And Jeroboam, when he divides everything, he realizes that the tabernacle is in the southern region, and his people want somewhere to worship and something to worship. So he sets up two golden calves. One was in Bethel, which is in the southern area of the northern tribe. Guess where the other one was placed? In Dan. Yeah, so these people have already wholesale gone into idolatry. This entire tribe of Israel has gone into idolatry and this false priesthood, and then they're the leaders in the moral degradation of idolatry with Israel.